everyone, my name is Gabriel and welcome to the Catholic Animators Group.
This video is a response about some lies going around that Percy Jackson is better quality than Harry Potter. It's fine if you subjectively think it's better, but just because you like some superficial details about Percy Jackson, such as him being dyslexic or having ADHD or the books having a more diverse cast of characters, doesn't necessarily mean it's more well written. One of the first rules of storytelling is that ideas are superficial. That's the part that's completely subjective. In this video, we shall explain how Percy Jackson was poorly executed, and why Harry Potter is successful to the point that Percy Jackson is a caricature of a story in comparison. Number 1. Percy Jackson tells instead of shows. Percy Jackson does this in a lot of sneaky ways. One of the biggest examples is by substituting interaction with reaction. The Percy Jackson series favors things like head shaking, eye rolling, and only you would do that type humor. One egregious example is that over the course of the series, the main characters are given over 45 nicknames. The reason for this is that the main goal in Rick Riordan's writing is to showcase the personalities of the characters and be impressed with them for their own sake. According to Goodreads, the majority of the most popular quotes from the book revolve around a character's personality. For example, "I'm all about doing the impossible." Maybe he and Percy did share something else, a stupid sense of humor. Hazel rolled her eyes. "You're both impossible." "The darkness is my birthright," etc. It's over-analytical and unrealistic. It's also cheating, because it's telling you how to think of the characters instead of proving it and letting you make up your own mind. In comparison, the majority of quotes from Harry Potter seem to be insight. It takes a great deal of bravery to stand up to our enemies, but just as much to stand up to our friends. To a well-organized mind, death is but the next great adventure. Fear of a name increases fear of the thing itself. The distinction between reaction and interaction is important if you think of portrayal as a lens. Many children's books tend to have a dirty or foggy lens, so you can't clearly see or appreciate the characters, such as Charlie Bowen and Septimus Heap. Percy Jackson is a series that actually doesn't feel foggy, but the way it achieves clarity is cheap because it's telling things in narration and reactions instead of showing them. But the characters weren't the only thing that suffered from the book's tendency to celebrate itself through the characters' and narrators' opinions. The Percy Jackson series were full of good ideas that were apologized for over and over again. Just one example is the floating table named Buford. Instead of letting the audience process it and make their own opinion about it, Riordan is quick to make his characters point that out for you. The result is that the audience is completely interrupted before they can come to any sincere conclusion. As a result, the ideas end up being tedious and easily forgotten instead of classic and memorable. Look at the snake under the bathroom in Harry Potter. That's a pretty bizarre idea when you think about it, but you don't see anyone complaining. Instead, we remember how it made us feel because it's not constantly being pointed out or apologized for. Harry doesn't constantly shout things like, "Nervous? Me?" Maybe because we're, looking for an ancient snake monster that wants to kill us in a secret passageway under a bathroom. In other words, there's room for an audience in these stories. There isn't in Percy Jackson. As I said, most of these points could be summed up as being the difference between telling and showing. Number 2. Rick Riordan relies on banter and pop culture references as a crutch. Don't get me wrong, things like banter are fine if you accept it for what it is. It's like icing on a cake. It tastes great, but it needs the cake to be worth eating. But if it exists for its own sake, then the law of conservation of detail requires that it gets cut. There are a lot of instances in Percy Jackson where people would make witty quips for their own sake instead of contributing anything of value to the story. Some people enjoy witty quips, but saying some people enjoy fast food more than a steak just means some people enjoy the superficial experience more than the substance. As long as you realize and admit this is what you're doing, then there's nothing wrong with it. There's only a problem when you think this makes something objectively better when in reality it just means you have personal reasons for liking a superficial part of it. The equivalent of this would be if someone said Harry Potter was better than Percy Jackson because the cover was their favorite color. Number 3. Percy Jackson fails to deliver a sense of danger. This is inexcusable because if there's no possibility of losing something, then you can't be concerned about it. No major or relatable characters die in Percy Jackson or Heroes of Olympus despite it being about a war. The rare deaths that do occur happen mainly to side characters, are infrequent, and treated as exceptional events which can never be forgotten. Not to mention that some are reversed entirely. As a result, battles are short, easy, predictable, and anticlimactic. The most significant death in Percy Jackson is the character named Luke, a character who was in less than a fourth of the main story. Luke's death pales in comparison to the deaths of beloved major characters such as Dumbledore, Snape, Sirius, Fred Weasley, Harry Potter proves early on that bad things can happen to good characters, enforcing a sense of danger. As the series goes on, character after developed character dies or gets seriously injured, just as they would in an actual war. It makes you care more about the story because the fates of the characters are unknown, and there's a reason to read and find out what happens. How can you surprise people if their expectations are always proven right? You can't, and neither did Rick Riordan. To make matters worse for Percy Jackson, all the villains are shown as comedic buffoons, except when you're supposed to suddenly take them seriously for climactic battles and stuff. Rick Riordan never realized how much power is in the unironic, even to be more hilarious sometimes. A legitimate sense of danger lends itself to opportunities for more powerful humor as well as concern. If not so quick to kill the mood with cheap gags, setting up a grave environment gives you a background which can be more powerfully contrasted with humor. Number 4. Percy Jackson's moral philosophy is not consistent. Philosophies are important when you tell a story as well. Stories are more interesting when they're written by someone who has clear personal convictions as an individual. It's obvious Rick Riordan is wishy-washy when it comes to what he believes because he tries to justify things in a story with half-baked relativism. The morals are random, and only certain characters are singled out to be accountable for their actions, like Octavian, while others get away with murder. Nico literally allows Octavian to commit suicide, and Percy's mother turns her ex-husband into stone and sells him at a garage sale. The world building is as sloppy as the morals for the same reason. In Heroes of Olympus, Greek, Roman, Norse, Egyptian, Indian, Muslim, and Christian religions are all valid. This is justified with the vague throwaway sentences that imply gods are merely manifestations of human culture and everyone ultimately sees what they believe. Even if this were true in the story, it still begs the question of how these true perspectives reconcile with each other, and the story offers no explanation. The results are inconsistent, implausible, and strange suspension of disbelief to the point you just have to say, this is dumb. Harry Potter, on the other hand, comes across as more developed in its philosophy partially because it's a sincere story in the first place, with real action and danger in the story, so that meaningful lessons come naturally. J.K. Rowling obviously believes in good and evil. Unlike Rick Riordan, who only uses good and evil as a plot device, Harry Potter shows meaningful examples of what it means to choose between the two. Number 5. Percy Jackson writes romance unrealistically to the story's own detriment. In Heroes of Olympus, there are 7 main characters, and all of them, as well as most of the side characters, have a boyfriend or girlfriend. Just their age alone gives us a reason to not take any of their crushes seriously, especially not to the point of focusing 90% of the story on them. And then there's how love itself is described. These are just some quotes about Rick Riordan that are talking about crushes. Love is powerful, Piper. It can bring even the gods to their knees. Love is the most powerful motivator in the world. Love is the most savage monster of all. It is a costly thing, looking on the true face of love. Love is no game. It is no flowery softness. It is hard work, a quest that never ends. It demands everything from you. I think these lines speak for themselves. In Harry Potter, romance isn't even part of the plot. It's not until the epilogue that anyone gets together, and they're actually married and well into adulthood at this point, so you see the result of the relationship, not the teenage soap opera leading up to it. In fact, the only relationship any of the main characters are shown in throughout the series are Ron and Lavender, and this is to make fun of them for being annoying. In the genre of young adult fantasy, this cannot be taken for granted. And this, if nothing else, is a testament to how Harry Potter gets nuances of YA right in ways that other authors either neglect or ignore. Number 6. Rick Riordan writes girls poorly in his efforts to avoid stereotyping them. Sexist is a useless word here because it's a blanket adjective that does not get to the root of the problem. I would, however, call his way of writing and understanding girls corny and tedious. Rick Riordan makes all the girls more sensible than the boys in an effort to be politically correct. This ironically defeats the purpose of avoiding stereotypes by stereotyping in the opposite direction instead of simply making female characters with a variety of personalities. I'm not advocating that there be no difference between boys and girls, but I don't think girls exist simply to shake their heads at the silly, cute antics of the boys and be buzzkills to make them look goofier. Also, I don't think all girls are more intelligent or sensible than boys, and I think they can be laughed at and deserve to slip on a banana peel once in a while. If Rick Riordan wants to be fair to girls, why give them undue preference at the expense of the male characters? If you want to avoid sexism, be equal. Simple. Contrast this to Harry Potter with Hermione's personality. She's obviously the smartest girl in her class, but there's logical limits to what she can do, not to mention some weaknesses. She is portrayed as quirky, and you're allowed to look down on her sometimes. To conclude, we have a question for anyone who thinks Harry Potter isn't that much better than Percy Jackson or thinks it's easier to write. You can disagree that it's a good series, but you have to at least admit that it's successful. If it's easy to write similar books, wouldn't you think people would have done so, motivated by money if nothing else? The most fascinating thing of all is that nobody seems to pay attention to the reasons why Harry Potter is so successful, and are content to simplify the differences between them and other young adult fantasy books. Surely there are obvious differences between Harry Potter and Percy Jackson, Artemis Fowl, Charlie Bones, Septimus Heap, etc. Why does nobody study its success more closely to try to replicate it? Why do other authors always fall into a million different little writing errors that they can't even achieve this level of quality? And I'm not even saying Harry Potter is the best quality it could be. If you want to say Harry Potter is overrated, that might be fair. But why is it the only series that has this level of achievement? Why don't authors pay more attention to the differences? Why is there such a blindness to certain avoidable problems? What is wrong with the authors in the industry? It seems like they don't care or are unaware of the differences because they don't try to imitate Harry Potter's successful aspects. Harry Potter has millions more ratings than Lord of the Rings. Thousands of people review it every day, and bookstores rely on it for half of their income. You would think figuring out the reasons for this would fascinate more people than it does. You would think other kids' books wouldn't always be so bad and just avoid these simple mistakes. From all of us over here at the Catholic Animators Group, thank you for watching.